you know, I think that you have this alcoholic gene. This is way before I ever drank. I was probably like 13 or something like that.
She already knew.
She already knew. She saw it. I was nervous, but I woke up and texted with you a little bit. I took advantage of the free breakfast down in the lobby.
There you go.
Some greasy sausage
Let's
that I
go.
piled on a plate, and I was like 2 minutes away.
Good shit.
So
Good. Well, dude, man, I've known you for years
bit.
through the industry and through the recovery community, never well, but I showed up at a recovery event not long ago and turned the corner, and I was fucking blown away by your level of skill at your art,
Thank
man.
you, man.
I had no idea. I was mesmerized. I stood there for 20 minutes, and I was sitting there like peeking at it, trying not to geek out. But dude, your portraits, the murals, everything you do, man, to know that there's somebody in the recovery community that's doing art on that level is fucking incredible, dude.
I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I work hard.
Where have you did you just grow up an artistic dude, or was that a talent you always had, or you crafted it?
Yeah, for me, I think for any artist, we hear that a lot, like, oh man, it must be nice to have talent, and of course we don't see it that way. We just see all the practice, but not only did I like take to art real young, but I also took to, I don't know if I would have called it like a competitive level back then when I was a kid, but definitely I always had goals associated with whatever I was drawing, even at like 9, 10. It was around that age that I started drawing portraits. And I would have I had a big baseball card collection. And so I had this little desk in my room, and I would set up. The first one I did was Nolan Ryan, and I would like set it up like on the wall, and I would just sit there and draw it. And no skills on like how to do anatomy, the measurements that go into a face, anything like that. I was just raw dogging it. Like I want to see if I can draw what's right in front of me.
Right.
Started before that actually with like comic books and stuff, but it was around that age that I was like, I really want to try. To me, like back then, I was conflating like skill of an artist with like how realistic you were.
Right.
Yeah, and so it's my whole life.
That's funny you said that. What did you just say again? You said the skill of an artist.
Yeah, like I believed that my measure of how talented I was at art
was how realistic.
Was
right?
how realistic.
So that's what I've always thought it was, and then I'll see, but like I don't necessarily understand art. You know,
and
what I
a
mean?
lot of my clients are that way.
Because you'll see something and you'll be like, I look like I could just throw some paint at the wall and do that shit, but people are like, oh my God. You know what I mean? So there's some of it I don't understand, but dude, when I see some shit like yours, you see talent, you see fucking skill, you see hard work, like you see all that in it. And I'm not slighting any other artist, but it just happened to be my taste of what caught my eye. So
thank you, man.
That was fucking incredible. And then we got to meet up for coffee and sit down and talk a little bit, dude.
Fun, yeah.
And I, bro, I had no idea the shit that you've been through, just not just the addiction stuff, but the health stuff you're going through. So very excited to get you in here and sit down, bro, and crack you open and get going on this. So if you want to just give everybody a perspective of kind of like where you came from, like your drug history, what your shit was.
Sure. Yeah. So I haven't drank, done hard drugs in 10 years.
Double digits, bro.
But my journey, like so many people that we know in recovery, started way before that. And I kind of had to be like everybody else and enter a 12-step program in my mid-20s and, judge the shit out of it. And, so began this push-pull relationship for, I don't know, a handful of years, half a decade of going in, getting a couple months, leaving, building resentment at the 12-step program, trying it on my own, back and forth. And then about 10, 11 years ago, I moved here to Austin. My buddies always joke with me. I didn't really move here. I crash landed here like so many people do. And once I got out of detox, I was like, well, I'm too afraid to rock the boat. I don't want to move back to Dallas, which is where I had been tattooing in my 20s. So I stayed out here, stopped tattooing, started doing art full time. It wasn't quite as that smooth of a transition,
Right.
but that was like the goal, and that's kind of like what I stuck to.
Right. So alcohol was your main shit.
Alcohol was my main shit.
Old school, purist.
Yeah. And, I've worked with, mentored so many different people in the recovery space over the years, and alcoholics are definitely their own breed of people. Very emotional a lot of times. You don't run into too many other DOCs where people are using and then crying in the mirror just to like watch themselves cry. It's like that's a little piece that they like to get high on, like, look how sad I am.
Did you know girls like to take pictures of themselves crying and send it to each other?
No, but I could totally get into that. I would have been in that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I would have been, look at how sad I am. But
I started noticing that this is a trend, and I'm like, I didn't know this was a thing.
Yeah, yeah, I think it was just, going through a lot of like self-absorbed years of definitely feeling really, really bad. Really, alcohol's a depressant, and not knowing how to get out of that, not knowing how to get rid of that. So just staying in it.
Right.
And almost like, getting high on that in and of itself.
Right.
Yeah.
Isn't it funny how after you're in this world for a while, especially double-digit years and stuff like that, and once you start mentoring people is really when you can pick it out. But I could walk up to you and within a couple seconds, I could really just look at you and know pretty much what your drug of choice was.
Yes.
Like, oh, you're an alcohol guy, and they're like, how'd you know? And just, bro.
Yeah, newcomers in the alcohol space.
Or just any drug, meth, heroin, like I can usually pick it out.
And it's funny, most of the people I know, most of my close friends were opiate addicts, but I think it's like that for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Most of the people I know were opiate addicts, so they have these like crazy opiate stories of like, mostly in the vein of like how they needed to generate enough money to feed their deal. With booze, I mean,
$6, you can get a fucking pint of pop-off vodka.
And it's so bad for you. It's so
poison.
Yeah. I've gone through all sorts of different phases of like, this is what I'm drinking, including being out in Waxahachie, which is, it's a dry county up in North Texas.
Yep.
So no hard liquor. So I was drinking like box wine the whole time I was out there around the clock. And I'm like convinced to this day it's like poisonous, causes like mass insanity.
Right.
Yeah.
Did you ever get down? Did you ever have a Four Loko phase?
Yeah, I think Four Lokos kind of came on the scene as like a sort of novelty thing, like Steel Reserves and stuff like that. And I would definitely get a hold of those. That, I think, was when I was still drinking around people, still going out, still going to house parties. And then, over the course of my alcoholic career, eventually over time, just like with anything, you end up using alone.
Yeah, the social aspect leaves you.
Yeah, you're like, I can't be bothered. I can't be bothered with nobody telling me to slow it down. Or,
right.
Yeah.
So just give people a perspective of what type of alcoholic you were. Do you have a story or two that may stick out in your brain that would let people know?
Yeah, so I think that my drinking began the same as so many other people's. My mom actually told me, like, look, I think that you have this alcoholic gene. This is way before I ever drank. I was probably like 13 or something like that.
She already knew.
She already knew. She saw it. She saw these like characteristics, and I took that pretty serious. I grew up with a single mom, and they're pretty tough. I don't know if you've,
Oh yeah, I grew up single mom too.
Yeah, so they're tough ladies. They're playing both hats. And so when she said that, I took it as like this very foreboding warning of like, if this is a path I go down, it's going to destroy everything, or I might not be able to get back onto a good path. But I was like a pretty directionless kid, was a good kid, and all through junior high and high school made good grades, but just not a lot of direction and not a lot of a very strong sense of self. So started drinking in high school, and back then a lot of alcoholics might relate to this, but we would brag about it. We would brag about alcoholism, and it's like, I didn't really even understand the scope of what I was dealing with, but that's what I felt like I was. Like, yeah, I am an alcoholic, but it's actually this cool thing.
Yeah.
It's not bad. It's impressive.
Right,
You can drink a lot.
Right. You tell your friend, I got a drinking problem.
Yeah, and you know, for years, I just kind of shuffled everything into my life to where it fit within that umbrella of alcoholism. And so that looked like in, you know, when I was 18, 19, I moved to Germany with a couple buddies of mine and stayed out there for a year. Was like instantly 21. So I brought that advanced habit back to the States. Didn't really think anything of it. Bartended for a while, and was in that world for some years, and then really wanted to figure out a way to do art or some sort of like creative enterprise for a living, and literally picked tattooing because I felt like, well, this is a good or service that somebody wants constantly. I don't see it going anywhere. I can do that. I can make money, and nobody's gonna, you know, try to doctor what kind of lifestyle I have. So nobody was gonna tell me to reel it in back then. They were all doing the same thing or some version, some variant of it. I mean, I was around opiate addicts. I was around, you know, the occasional upper type dude, but we all went out clubbing, partied. So it was great for a long time. Totally chill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was on a podcast yesterday, and they asked me a similar question. They were trying to get a scope of like what heroin addiction was like and what withdrawals are like and stuff like that. And so I'm sitting there telling them, trying to explain what heroin withdrawals are like. And I was like, it sucks because if a doctor asks you, basically you're gonna basically tell them you have the flu. Like there's no other way to say it, but it's so much worse than that. But I was trying to explain it, and I was like, let me put it in a perspective for you. Imagine waking up so sick that you're clammed in sweat, you're hot and cold, you can't find a vein, but the only vein you can find is in your dick. And then that seems like a good idea.
Yeah.
So if
I hear so many gnarly stories from you guys. I was just sitting with this gal I know who like works in IT now. You know, you just totally wouldn't think this about her, but she was talking about shooting up in her eyeball.
In the eyeball?
Yeah.
That's a new one.
And she was like, you know, just so matter of fact about it. But yeah, my deal was, you know, I think when I start looking at like the beginning of the end, and I still had a long ways to go, I was tattooing, and, you know, with any addiction, especially with alcoholism, you begin to generate this sort of like panic disorder that goes along with it. And that's really what began to complicate things for me. We'll get up. I had let this buddy start living with me, he's kind of on and off the thing, still tattooing. But at the time, you know, I didn't know about all the sundry of like alcoholic and drug addicted stories that we generate. You know, I just took somebody at their word. If they like had this real woe is me, sort of everybody's out to get me story, I'd be like, man, that sucks. You know, like, I'll give you a hand. So I let this buddy start living with me, and he was a little bit more dialed in than I was alcoholically. Right. And so we would go out, party till 3, 4 in the morning, and then we'd wake up and go to the shop, and he'd start drinking. And I just remember thinking that hadn't even occurred to me as an option. You know, I'd day drunk before, but I'd never considered like,
I could drink
I could just drink before work.
Right.
You know? And he made it seem like so laid back. So he like popped me a shower beer. He was like, let's rip a couple shots. And so by the time we're making it to the shop at like noon, you know, we're already 4 deep. Yeah. And it also started this like relationship with benzos back then. You know, a lot of drunks go after benzos. If you can't be drinking on site for what usually your occupation, you don't want to get caught, float benzos in there.
Really? How did I not fucking know that? I've never heard that.
Same part of the brain. Same.
Benzos and alcohol. I don't know.
Same part of the
Suppressant?
brain. Yeah.
Depressant, whatever.
Yeah. And so that's why you'll hear a lot about like when people are drinking and taking Xanax, they like could black out way worse.
Yeah.
I even remember, over time you begin to like cultivate a clientele that appreciates that sort of like lifestyle. They learn that you drink all the time, you party all the time, and so you will attract clientele that is in that vein. And I remember this kid asking me, like, I was just popping him right in front of him, and then we'd stop, go take a cigarette break, go down the street, rip a shot at the bar. And he'd be like, dude, how are you not like blacked out the whole day that you're working? And I was like, well, I am. Yeah, that's what
This is what I do.
It's what I want.
Right.
It's what I don't want to see anything but this much.
Right.
That's all I want to see.
Right.
Yeah.
Looking back on your entire journey, would you say that was like your rock bottom time?
No.
I believe when we talked the first time, you said you had mentioned you had a couple different rock bottoms, but you were able to point to one, I thought.
Yeah, I mean, so around that time, after been tattooing 4 or 5 years, I started experiencing a lot of like health stuff with my heart, and I didn't know back then. I thought I was developing like a panic disorder. I would get these panic attacks that were so bad before I sat down with a client that I would faint.
Really?
Like while I was tattooing.
No shit.
Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking,
bro, if my tattoo artist fucking
can you imagine?
Passed out mid tattoo, I'd be like, oh, yo, dude.
Yeah, I mean, I think back on it, and it was just like such a rough time. And you develop this like issue where you're like, I don't even want to go into work. I have to make money.
How was the art coming out?
There was this like sweet spot that I could get in where everything would be fine, but I could definitely cross that line easily and fuck up a tattoo. And there's plenty of like bad tattoos out there for sure.
Of yours?
I mean, there's ones that I remember that like made it through the blackout that were just so significantly such a fucked up situation that I was like, this is not good. Of like, tattooing a typo on somebody's back.
Damn.
Yeah. So around that time, I was developing like all these what felt like panic attacks, and it was really like my heart was like struggling, and I was like falling out in front of the tattoo shop. And I went into the hospital, and they told me like, look, this was just kind of out of nowhere. I had some heart issues like as a child that never really got diagnosed, and so this was like always in the back of my head. But really through all my teenage years, it hadn't got addressed at all. All of my early 20s, it hadn't got addressed at all. And so I went into this hospital, and he was like, look, this is what's happening with you. You're developing cardiomyopathy. We don't know where it's come from. I've since found that out more recently, like this genetic thing that I have. But back then, we were like, we don't know. We don't know where it's coming from. Even with all the drinking that you're doing, you shouldn't have developed this sort of particular issue at this age. But either way, you can't drink anymore.
Right.
And that was just insane. That was like before I had gone into AA. And I remember that dude telling me that doctor, and he said it in this real matter-of-fact way. And I remember thinking, like, this is like preposterous. You might as well tell me to like pull $1 million out of thin air.
Right.
What am I supposed to do?
Mm-hmm.
I really truly felt like not built for this world, like too neurotic, too far down this alcoholic path. I was not near towards like my bottom yet, but I was already drinking around the clock. And then that was kind of like the beginning of the end for me. That started like 4 or 5 years of kind of like working, not really working,
right?
Being unemployed, drinking around the clock. Once you get to that point, you have to drink like every couple hours or it'll kick.
And is the stress of the heart stuff, is that like ramping up the drinking?
All of it, all in one big Easter basket. And my sort of lack of ability to meet things head on at that point in my life was inflaming the whole situation. Knowing that the medical community had like identified some issues within me and told me the number one thing to stop doing and that I was unable to do it, I just felt like I was like walking around this world with like a piano dangling above me.
Right.
Yeah, and there were multiple times that it like fell.
Bro, anybody listening to this right now, you think you're going through something, you're having a bad day, put yourself in that position right there at that moment, bro. That's some scary shit, dude.
Yeah. It's like really what I needed was, you know, I wish I could say I learned all the tools in AA to address that stuff, but it really was kind of a personal journey that I had to be really committed to overcoming. But back then, back before I got the time that I have now, I was like, there's just no way. There's no way, and the way that this is probably going to look is me just drinking until something happens.
Right.
But nothing would ever happen. Something, you know, something medically horrible would happen, but I wouldn't die.
Right.
You know? And so it's just like, fuck. I really got the impression by my late 20s, early 30s when I got sober that whatever was up there was not going to let me go out that way.
Right.
But he was definitely going to let pieces get carved off if I wanted to keep going down that path.
Yeah. Bro,
You know?
it's heavy.
Yeah.
When I ended up getting in so much trouble with the law that at one point I'm looking at doing 20 years. And, dude, I used to run around thinking I was a badass and I was a tough guy. And then a judge looks you in the face, tells you he's sending you away for nothing under than 20 years. Tough guy shit goes right out the window.
Yep.
And so that was a major moment for me. But I remember, you know, starting to do well, starting to get sober, starting to do good stuff in the community. I kind of kept a record of everything that I was doing. And then when I went to go face the time, they ended up blessing me with probation because they saw all the stuff that I've been doing. And so that right there was the moment where it gave me this like shining ray of hope. And ever since I saw that hope, I latched onto it. I haven't looked back. What was it for you where you kind of finally got it? Not saying I made it, I got this or anything like that, but where you knew like you were on the path and you were there.
That probably didn't happen till out here in Austin. Although there were other times that I like was able to net some sort of significant amount of times sober for me.
Yeah.
In Waxahachie. So Waxahachie is like where I wound up, which is like this little country town in North Texas.
Super country.
Yeah, towards my late 20s, and I was living with my dad, who we'd kind of had this on and off relationship over life. Didn't know him super well, but I was like, I need a place to dry out, right? And I did not get dried out there. I continued to drink for another year, and he was finally like, dude, you're going to have to like shit or get off the pot.
Mm-hmm.
And I started to go to AA out there, and such a different vibe from like Austin's recovery community. You know, they just have like one clubhouse. It's just a bunch of country people going. There's not really.
It's the same people saying the same shit.
Yeah, there's not really a hierarchy going on. You know,
Mm-hmm.
Everybody gets a chance at the podium. You're like cycling through the same 30, 40 members.
Yeah.
But I think even back then there was a part of me that knew I was just on tenuous ground, but I was enjoying like the 5 or 6 months that I got sober. You know, ultimately I went back to tattooing, which got me back on the sauce. But that's when I first knew like there's a potentiality here within a 12-step framework to get better. But I don't know what it's going to take, what it's going to look like. I felt like I had a good sponsor at that point in time, this old-timer dude. And I visited him out there in Waxahachie until he passed away a couple years ago. But I just felt like there was something missing. And it wasn't until I wound up here in Austin that I really had to eliminate all associated stimuli with my use, which meant tattooing.
Gotcha.
For me. Tattooing just brought out this like weird competitive side to me where I was not having fun, and I would get sober and I'd get hyper focused on like getting better, which isn't great either, you know, with nothing to moderate it, and back and forth. So once I crash landed out here, I felt like there might be a path forward.
Yeah, dude.
So,
Austin was very much that for me too. I tell people all the time, like, I'm not an ambassador to Austin, but Austin very much saved my life when I needed it.
yeah. Yeah, and it seems like I would say well over half the amount of people in Austin's recovery scene are not from here.
Right.
So it's like, in a lot of geographical instances, a shift like that would not be the solution. But I think that Austin has so much to offer that whatever it is that you're interested in sobriety, there's a pursuit available to you.
For sure.
That's how it was for me.
Hell yeah. And dude, I think we're really lucky at the time we're in right now as far as the recovery goes, because so many people are like following this recovery out loud, talking about their shit on podcasts and everything that they're doing. And I think personally that's what will end up breaking the stigma of addiction, because to me the only reason we've had a stigma is because everybody wants to keep this shit a secret, not talk about it and all that. So at one time, my recovery looks very different today at, 7, almost 8 years sober than it did at day 1 or fucking year 2, year 3, whatever. And, back then it needed to be program all the time, and I get it. But now it's so cool to have built on that. And the one part that sucks, because I don't ever want anybody to think I'm trashing the 12 steps, because it saved me. It absolutely is one of the tools that absolutely saved me. But it's cool to be to a point to understand that was my foundation and continue to build on it with other tools. Yeah. Whether that's therapy, running, the gym, like community, all these different things. And so, like, what's it look like for you now?
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. It was expounding on what the people in the AA community informed me was like relevant to sobriety.
Because you came from like a hardcore 12-step background, right?
Yeah, and so that was very different from what I had experienced out in Waxahachie. These like variants of AA, that could be considered more fundamentalist over here, more progressive over here. There were all these different kinds, and when I first started coming into the rooms out here, I didn't really like that. I didn't really like committing to like one linear sort of deal, and so I'd get different home groups and bounce around to different home groups, and that's kind of how I got to know so many people like within the rooms, is I would just be all over the place. Mm-hmm. That was one thing that I felt like I had to do in the beginning, was a lot of meetings. I didn't feel like if I stayed home too much, I was going to drink. I felt like what the biggest risk for me was like going crazy again and just not being able to do this life thing. And so I had really, in a lot of ways, felt like I had drank to this point of like revulsion to it, which I don't hear a lot of people talk about, but there are some alcoholics that know what I mean. But it was like I had drank so much and gotten so sick and had so many negative health consequences and like puking blood and messing up your GI tract, that it was just like towards the end it was like drinking poison. So in a lot of ways I felt like if my life gets into a position where I just simply cannot tolerate being out here with everyone, I don't think I would go back to alcohol. I don't know what I would go to, but I don't want to see either. And the other risk is like suicide, right? That's what they tell you in the rooms. And so a lot of my early years were spent in service, just a mess of sponsees constantly, and they're turning over. You get like 3-4 guys to 4 steps and they're out of here, and new guys are coming, and I'm doing H&Is, and that nets new sponsees, and I'm speaking all the time at this conference or this group, and that nets new sponsees. And so that was my life for good 4 or 5 years of just hardcore that. I think that there's a line in the book about we don't make sole vocation of this work, but certainly in a lot of ways I had gone that route.
it's tough because I don't ever want the message to get lost, because I think it's very important for a newcomer to do something similar to what you're doing. Absolutely, being that hard shit, the one where people are keeping you super accountable and where you're, you know what I mean, big book boot camp.
Yeah.
Like, I'm all for that, but you also, that was the big thing with me. I didn't understand that a world existed outside of the program. I didn't realize that I needed to find something to build my own life.
Well, and I felt in a way, you know, kind of the more hardcore you go with that, the more you begin to really believe inside of yourself that if I even look out the window too much, I'm something terrible is going to happen to me. And
that addiction that they say is doing push-ups around the corner is going to fucking see me.
Oh yeah, I totally believe that, because so many, you know, there's a lot of argument about what is classified as a relapse and what's not, and is it a lapse? Is it a full relapse? Does it matter? You know?
Explain that, will you? What's the difference between a lapse and a relapse?
Yeah, like, you know, and I don't really have a personal opinion, but it's like if somebody picked up something that wasn't their DOC for a day and then got back on it, versus developed like a problematic issue with another substance, or went back to their DOC. And I was just so afraid. It seemed like when I would start drinking again, it would just be almost comedically worse than the time before.
Yeah.
And I felt like that's what was waiting for me. And I just was thoroughly convinced that if I started drinking again, or anything that would bring me back to drinking, that I would die. You know, I really felt like that. And I had doctors telling me stuff like that. And yeah, so I just...
If you don't mind me asking, like, when a doctor tells you something like that, like, what is your headspace at that moment?
You know, for a lot of years, I think that I felt the same separation between medical staff and myself as I felt with the rest of the world. And so it didn't really matter who I met out there in the world. They were better than me. They were doing better than me. They had it figured out. I didn't. There was a part of me that truly felt like cursed in a way, you know, like there is a God and I'm meant to be made an example out of, you know, which is like crazy ego in reverse type shit. But yeah, for a lot of my life, I felt like I would talk to these doctors and they would be coming from this other than position, and they didn't really care. You know, it was just their job to tell me like how screwed up I was. And then it was my job to take that information and do with it what I will. But nobody really would care if something bad happened to me or not. And that's, you know, not my reality, not my existence now. I'm like close with my team of doctors, and I work like hand in hand with them often. But that's how, for a long time, and I don't think that I'm special in that. I think a lot of people in recovery feel like they kind of look at doctors almost like cops. You know?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. It seems like a lot of people either go this like criminal route or like medical route. A lot of alcoholics that drink alone, you know, that's kind of the recipe for things to fall apart internally or with your brain, you know, mental health issues, but just GI tract, your cardiovascular tract, pulmonary, everything suffers from alcohol. It's really super...
There's poison.
But yeah, so that's like kind of what kept me locked into it. And I think when you look at like the neurology of addiction, you find that you've like just developed these patterns of thought that have dictated your entire life. And it's how we do everything. It's how we go into relationships. It's how we do our job, and everything's tainted or colored through this lens of addiction or alcoholism. And that's really what I was trying to break. But after 4 or 5 years of doing AA, as hard as I could, I didn't feel any wiser for it. I felt no more prepared to enter the world.
Right. And
And
unfortunately, we trap ourselves in that bubble. Dude.
Yeah, and it was not an easy transition for me to figure out how to go after my dreams and protect my sobriety.
Right.
It was not easy.
Yeah. Dude, like my recovery today, like I was saying before, looks completely different. And like now, this may not be within the terminology that's acceptable within the rooms or whatever, but like, dude, my recovery, I get to do some of the coolest, dopest shit now that I believe is part of my recovery, because I'm building community. Fucking, whether it's this podcast, the run group we're starting, like all these things, like, but it's all still centered around recovery. It's all still centered around sobriety, living a healthy life, pushing yourself, overcoming adversity.
It all goes away without it.
Right.
Yeah.
And so where a 12-step person might look at me and be like, well, he doesn't even fucking go to meetings anymore. Like, I want, just the way I look at these things is I look at the program, I look at running, the gym, meditation, prayer, all that stuff. These are all tools. Some tools may be bigger than others, obviously. The program, very big tool. But I have that tool in my bag. I've utilized it. I know what to do with it. And so now if I hit a rough patch or whatever, I can always pull out the tool. But as of currently right now, like, I have other things that are taking that place, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And so people discovering passion, discovering community, like, that's what my recovery looks like. Mm-hmm. And so I wish somebody would have gave me some type of similar message at that point. Because we all know what it looks like to sit down in your first meeting, and this was my outlook. I was like, I got to do this shit forever. Like, it was like I don't want to say a death sentence, because obviously the alternative of what we were doing wasn't better at all. But it's a pretty daunting thing to sit there and look. And it's hard to explain to somebody like, hey, you're going to find out what works for you. You're going to be able to build on this eventually and stuff like that. But I wish somebody would have had a tactful conversation where it's like, bro, you're going to get to one day where your recovery is going to be the shit.
Same. Yeah, I really felt like in the mentorship, sponsorship world, I excelled because I had been downlined all this data about traditional views of AA and fundamentalist views of AA, and maybe this camp thinks they know precisely how the book's written, and maybe this camp thinks, no, what was meant in this chapter was this, and there's a lot of that sort of thing going on, mm-hmm. just like in religion, yep. Right? And I would take all of that, and in a sponsorship situation, I felt like I could so much more readily access the kid's heart and be like, look, this is the goal here, and this is why they say things like this. And you could easily find yourself in this domain of recovery and never leave. Mm-hmm. And there's plenty of people like that out there that, and they don't want anything different. That's what they want is 6 meetings a week. That's where they have their relationships. That's where they have their, but I think, I think people end up getting mentorship from the people that they desire it from, and so people are going to find the right people, but people really have to be shown how to start knitting in their hopes and dreams. Mm-hmm. And, even some rhetoric around that doesn't conflate with the AA message, which is like selfish and self-centered, and that's part of our problem is we are thinking about our hopes and dreams, and we are thinking about how to accomplish what we want, and that's not what we need to be doing. We need to be talking about saving the next suffering alcoholic. And so there was some real confusing messaging for me in the beginning. I had left tattooing. I think we mentioned it when we had coffee. Do you know Bob Davis?
I don't think
Maybe
so.
not. He used to own this sober house.
Bob, if I know you and I didn't remember, I apologize.
He's an awesome guy. He owned this sober house called Tin Roof. Okay. And it used to be a meeting for the longest time. Okay. In their like carport open garage area, they would have this meeting. And so that was the sober house that I ended up getting into. And it was there. I'd never been in sober living, and he was kind of like, here's the rule of the land or whatever. You got to get a job within 30 days and blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, my head's like spinning. I'm like, I got to live with all these yo-yos, and I was just so used to kind of being a junkyard dog in so many ways and doing whatever I wanted, you know, within the tight constraints of alcoholism.
Right, of course.
And so I remember talking to him and being in a real bad mood. I thought, I will never, ever be happy again. I will never know happiness ever again. Alcohol didn't bring me happiness, but it silenced the unhappiness inside me.
Yeah.
But now that that's out of the way, my natural affect is going to return, and I'm just going to have to learn how to live this way, and sucks to suck. And I had grown up, my mom taught me, you know, life's not fair, and so I was ready for that. But I remember asking him, hey, do you think I could try doing art for a living? And he was like, no, you need to get a job. And I was like, all right, because I didn't even know what that meant when I asked him. You know, I could probably do commissioned artwork. And so I went and got a job at Walgreens and started doing portraits at nighttime in my room. And the idea behind portraits were, this isn't it's not like artiste mamby-pamby visual journal that I'm getting out. I'm creating a piece for somebody else.
Right.
I'm providing a service. And I thought in that there was protection from ego to a degree.
Right.
And there was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was talking to a good buddy yesterday. He'd reached out a couple years back, needed help. I got him in somewhere, and he got sober. He's still sober. He's doing really well. But we were talking yesterday on the phone, and he had kind of brought up the program, and he was just saying it wasn't, you know, I'm still sober. It wasn't for me, this and that. And as we continued to talk, I was like, bro, you never even got a sponsor or worked the steps. So you can't really say it's not for you. Like the most people I hear say that it's not for me, I'm like, did you do your steps? Did you ever sponsor anybody? And they're like, no, why didn't I just knew it wasn't for me. Like, bro, you didn't even get to the end. How the fuck do you know if it's for you or not?
Yeah, I would run into, you know, plenty of like newly sober kids. People would shoot a lot of like tattooed individuals my way, you know, like, hey, I got a sponsor for you. And I'm like, dude, save it, man, you know? But I think that
bro, you would have had a crew if you would have had all your people around at once.
Oh,
that would have been a click.
I'm so more of a behind the scenes person, but you know, it's like I would have nothing for them. That's still the answer. Like if you're wanting sobriety, you're gonna have to break down your neurology down to its foundation level and rebuild it. And there's no way around that but years.
Yeah.
So I don't really know what to tell you. So that is like the great jumping off point for all of us, whether you're an ultra marathoner or a live painter or, you know, a podcast studio guy. You know, it's like that's the recipe for everybody. And
award-winning videographer.
That's the recipe for all of us. And I don't think it necessarily has to be AA, but it has to be that level of disruption to the habits that provide the framework for your life.
Yeah.
It has to be that disruptive. And so in that same sense, today, I could get the same value out of feeling, say, confident today, confident in my life, confident in whatever I'm doing later today. And, you know, so that would indicate this feeling of like, well, I don't need to go do this or go do that. And if I went to a meeting, I would get the same benefit because it would be contrary to like what I'm wanting to do. And it's goes into that line of thinking of like discomfort is where growth happens.
Right, for sure.
And I think that's what all young people have to understand about this. It's not easy for anybody. And so, I don't know. It's almost like you would prefer to see them go into the rooms, date people in the rooms, and build a life within the rooms for a while, because it would ensure them enough safety to change their brain over the course of 4 or 5 years and start figuring out who they are.
Right. However you get them there.
However you get it, you know.
So So now, what's life look for you like now? What's your recovery look like? What do you enjoy doing? What are all the blessings that you get to experience today?
You know, I think throughout the course of my sobriety, I was constantly living under this umbrella of fear of like, how am I going to make art work for me, you know? And as far as I saw, it had to work out that way. I didn't, there was a time that I went back to school I was pursuing a nursing degree and ended up getting like a pre-health degree and stopped college at that point because I was like, I don't think this is right for me. So everything just always pointed back to art. But when I was doing it, it's just like any other entrepreneurial hustle in the sense that you're only as good as you're booked out.
Mm-hmm.
And that's got to keep happening for perpetuity. And you have to be building your price points. And I was not getting higher price points on these portraits. And I was really like under a lot of stress at any given point. And so there were plenty of times that I would go work in a treatment center for some period and invariably end up going to like the business development side or admissions or whatever. And then I'd be like, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm going back to art, and each time I'd come back to art, I would like make these like edits to the structure of my business in a way that I felt like it would provide more long-term stability. And so over the last couple years, simultaneously, I'm trying not to bounce all over the place, but simultaneously my health started to decline again, right? I have a condition that I'm diagnosed with forever, congestive heart failure. That can end up looking like a lot of different things. You can get a transplant, you cannot get a transplant. You can have a device and your pump function never worsens over time, or it can worsen over time. And sometimes you don't know why it happened. But it seemed like since COVID, my health started to go down. Personally, on a personal level, I'm doing art. I'm going to work at treatment centers. I'm going back to art. About a year and a half ago, I started this like mural company. That was off the ground for maybe 2 months, and I just got like dead dog sick. I was going to my doctors a lot, and they couldn't figure out what was causing this like drop in pump function. I had developed what's called AFib, which is a type of rhythm with your heart where it goes into tachycardia, and I was like suspended into this like tachycardia rhythm for like a year and a half of just like racing rhythm, primarily at nighttime. So at that point in my life, I start using kratom. I'm like looking for anything to calm my system down, and it worked for a little bit, and then it didn't. I felt like it turned on me in some way. Like it felt like it made my blood pressure go up, which doesn't really make sense. I don't know a whole lot about it, but I ended up getting real sick. We cannot figure out this AFib. I had several procedures done. I ended up going to the hospital, right? A couple of my buddies get me in there. It ends up being this big deal. I'm like kicking kratom. I don't know anything about it. The doctors don't know anything about it. So I think it was at that point in time, I was like talking to one of my doctors, and I was just like, crying. And I'm like, I just don't know what to do. I work so hard, and he's like, we're going to get this figured out. This is like a new doctor that I got, a cardiothoracic surgeon. Okay. And so that's what you have when you get a transplant, right? And I'm in the hospital, and I was in there for about a week. They had me on this pump that was like pumping both ventricles of my heart. I got out after a week. They're like, you can't work. I'm like, I have to work. So I'm like trying to like grind out murals, like near dead. and going to see this guy, Dr. Cawthon, and he just starts making these little edits to my diet, these little edits to my medication. And he was like, my goal is to make it to where you don't have to get a transplant. And I was like, had no faith that he was going to be able to do that.
Right.
You know, obviously was like off the kratom once I got out of the hospital, back to square one in a lot of ways. I really had to like hang on to the idea that, you know, I still haven't drank. I didn't go back to this, and that would have been the end,
Right.
you know, for me. And so I was like feeling bad about myself, you know, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, as of like 3 weeks ago, I've been doing this cardiac rehab, which I told you about for the last like couple months, which means going to the hospital to like their gym and
Right.
getting hooked up to a bunch of stuff
Right.
and working out.
Right.
And
I've done some of that stuff.
yeah, I'm in remission. He
Let's
said
go.
I'm in remission.
Let's fucking go.
Yeah. So now I'm like kind of at this point where I'm like, well, now what?
Right.
Now what can happen? Now it's still a possibility that I have to get a transplant one day, but I think that what I've realized over the last 3-4 years of dealing with like the heart going bad is, you know, there is no better time than now. Like whatever it is that you're wanting to pursue it and figure out what needs to be done to make sure that that's possible.
Mm-hmm.
So if you've got some ancillary goals that are unrelated to recovery, how do I incorporate recovery into my life in a way that supports these other goals?
Right.
And there's a lot of things that make the AA space valuable: community, right? A sense of spirituality, a sense of self that you hopefully find within those rooms. And so if you're not going into the rooms to get that, it just has to be supported elsewhere. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm so like blessed beyond measure to have the group of friends that I have. And these are people that do all variations of programs in AA and otherwise. And, but it's really just a group of guys and gals that kind of are not afraid to tell me when they think I need to look at something differently.
Right.
I just have to be willing to listen.
Hey,
you know?
sometimes that's easier than others.
Yeah. I think when you're a person in recovery and you spend a lot of time alone, you get used to answering to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
For sure. Do you find, just with the health risks that you've been through and, you know, just still knowing that it could still be there one day, do you find yourself living your life in a different way, like kind of that mindset of like every day could be our last? Or
No. So I've never, as long as I've had a device anyways, and I've had a device in my chest for 14 years.
Oh, okay.
I've never felt like there was a risk of sudden death, because that's the purpose of this thing, is to prevent that.
Okay.
But there were periods over like the last couple years when I was in that AFib where this thing started going off, electrocuting me, and that was not fucking chill at all.
Holy
Bro,
fuck. I can't even.
Bro, I remember
I'm afraid to even comment on it. Dude.
how I was going on a date with this gal, and I had been feeling bad. I'd been in this AFib thing
Right.
for like weeks, and it would go away for a couple days, come back. You know, I'm like eating this kratom shit at night, and that would seem to calm my pulse down. But then it started like causing the opposite. I felt like, and I remember calling her, you know, a few hours before we were supposed to meet up, and I was like, hey, I'm really not feeling good, and I think I need to reschedule. And she was kind of pressing me, like, well, what's going on? And I was like, my whole life, I had never talked about this heart stuff with anybody, you know. I don't come from that. I don't come from that background. So there were girlfriends that I would have here and there in sobriety where I would like kind of let them in on it, but most of the time I wouldn't.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the time I just wouldn't talk about it. I wouldn't talk about it with my homies. And it's not that I wanted to obscure the fact that it was a reality. It was more that I didn't know how to talk about myself in relation to it.
Mm-hmm.
I felt so helpless to it. It really felt like something that was like out of my control, like the weather. And I was just like trying to live in its world,
right.
you know? And so, yeah, you know, with this device going off left, right, and center, it went off 3 or 4 different times over the past like year and a half.
Mm-hmm.
Hasn't for a long time now,
right.
months. But that was like really, you know,
scary.
It'd be like
shit.
getting paddled.
I'd be nervous. That'd be scary. Well, dude, I definitely believe that God has you here for a reason. Everything He's put you through, and then
I think so too. Yeah, everything's like kind of come together with the art thing, and you've seen what that's looked like, and you know, it's just kind of like
y'all need to check him out. It is fucking incredible.
It's kind of coming into this like new era of like where I've left doing portraits.
Mm-hmm.
That was before I knew you, but that's what I did for a long time, and so a lot of portraits of people's wives and dogs and kids and so on and so forth. And now we're getting on into this bigger playing field of you know, a lot of like professional potential, and it's just a lot of fun. I would recommend to anybody to start their own thing. I think I love it.
Fucking right. Dude.
I don't think everybody's built for it. No. But man, I've told little sponsees that and stuff all the time. Start a lawn care business. You like to mow, right? You know. But I truly believe if you have something that is of you
mm-hmm.
and really represents everything that you try to be, and it's this product, right, that represents you, I think that you'll stop at nothing to protect it. And that's been my experience with art.
Fucking right.
Yeah.
Dude. Could not agree with you more.
It's
fucking
like
right.
I have to be able to forecast like trouble coming down the road
mm-hmm.
way ahead, because I want to protect not just my livelihood, but my message to the world, my legacy.
Right.
Yeah.
Dude, I completely agree. And
you know what I mean?
I take it serious too. You know what I mean?
I take it very serious. And it's in so many ways, it feels like Homer's Odyssey or Iliad or something, you know,
right.
It's just this like personal journey of man.
Right.
You know, and this life that we don't know how long is going to last.
Right. 100%.
You know?
Dude, let's say somebody's listening to this and they heard your story and it fucking hit them right in the heart. No pun intended. But they're out there struggling right now. What do you have to say to them?
I would say if you want your life to change, you're going to have to figure out how to be brave. And really, the thing about bravery is you fake it till you make it. Mm-hmm. With most of us, you know, it's like, I think there's some saying out there about fear is being frightened and doing something in spite of that or something like that. But I think that's the name of the game is you have to be willing to be determined, which is not something that people in recovery or newly sober individuals are good at, which is trying something, failing at it, and trying it again, and just being dogged about it.
Right.
I mean, that is in me,
mm-hmm.
head to toe. But, you know, a lot of people, they go to one AA meeting and they think, you're going to find shit that you don't like about it.
Of course.
You're going to think that the people are obnoxious. You're going to find that the guy chairing was arrogant and felt like he knew it all, or these people were annoying, or they were too happy, or whatever. And that can't be a reason to not pursue healthfulness.
Right.
So I think there's just a lot to be said for making a decision to stick something out and find people that resonate with you, that seem to, you know, they told me to pick people that had what I wanted. And so I'd thread those people into my life and have people above me and people below me, and that's really the sweet spot. And then, you know, as your life grows and manifests and turns into these bigger, cooler things, you can become more surgical with the type of teaching that you do.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
like where yours comes in with running And, you know, who knows? Like,
Right.
we'll probably cross paths with that as I slowly, like, march my way up to running, you know?
Just so you know, the Fuck Drugs run team starts on the 19th next Saturday, bro. So come
Dude,
out.
I'm still pounding it out on those treadmills, but I'm, like, right there, beginning to run. That's something we're going to be talking about this week, actually, at a doctor's appointment. So I think that's the ticket, is just get in and know I do not know how to do this for myself. I do not know how to get sober. Otherwise, I would have, you
Right.
know. And so I need to, like, let some other people tell me what to do.
Right.
But keep sight of your goals, too.
100%. You said an important part, and you were talking about faking it so you make it. And I remember first coming into the program, or even now today, just in life and business and all these things, like, you step into a room and you feel like everybody else has it figured out.
Yes.
And you have no idea what the fuck you're doing.
Yes.
I was sitting there yesterday talking to a very, very successful businessman, and we were sharing something very similar, and I was telling him how I feel like that, and he's like, bro, I feel like that. We all feel like that.
Yeah.
We're all trying to figure it out. Anybody that's acting like they got it figured out is fucking wrong. And so that's huge, man, because anybody listening to this, anybody first stepping into those rooms thinking, oh, these people got it figured out. They don't, man. They've figured out a way to do it. They don't got it figured out.
That was huge for me to hear. And that's something I heard in Waxahachie from that old-timer sponsor I had out there, Bob. He said, look, man, he was just this old, like, Southern charm gentleman, you know.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't take anybody serious, which I loved, you know. And it seems like in Austin, like, everything's, like, very serious, like what type of guru you represent within the recovery domain. But he just thought it was all a joke.
Right.
He's like, look at all these people that, you know, probably should be on house arrest, like getting a and he would, and, you know, I'm like kicking booze,
Right.
sick as a dog, and he'd sit there and elbow me, like, look at this fucking guy, like, you know, he's like 80 years old, and he'd be pointing at somebody sharing, like, look at this fucking, what the fuck is he talking about?
Right.
And it just kind of reminded me, like, you know, I don't have to take this so serious. Not everything has to be like Mr. Serious Face
Right.
all the time. But, yeah. Just think back on that time.
So, dude, one of my favorite, did I interrupt you?
No.
One of my favorite questions to ask, I asked it every episode, but hypothetically speaking, you're walking out tonight for the UFC middleweight championship of the world. What is your walkout song?
You know, I don't know. Probably some, like Paul Wall, maybe. I've been
Okay.
feeling him lately.
Okay.
You know,
Old-
I've enjoyed watching him get, like, older
Right.
and stay cool.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
so
it's been
that's
cool.
like the goal always.
Right.
Yeah, so I'll probably represent
Let's go.
something gritty, you know, from back in the day.
Love that shit.
What would yours be? I'm curious.
Mine always changes. It just depends on what type of vibe I'm on. Today would probably be. Bro, this is gonna be funny, but I can't get Pink Pony Club out of my head.
Yeah.
Fucking. Did we talk about this?
No.
Bro, I heard that song and just started singing it around jokingly in my house. And then we were doing the Austin Marathon, and the one thing about road races that I don't particularly like, because I come from the trail running world, and it's very like, people are out there talking shit, they're competitive, but they're talking. And you go to a road race, and everybody's like super serious and all rigid and locked in, and I can't stand that shit. And so, like, you're in a pack of runners, we're running 26 miles, everybody's dead silent, just sitting there like this. And so I'll just start Pink Pony Club and just start blurting that shit out, and people start laughing or whatever. But in all honesty, just to throw people off, I'd probably do that. But there's a rapper named Don Tripp.
Okay.
There's a song called Man on Fire. I think that would probably be it right there.
I've heard that's the secret sauce with heavy lifting a lot of times, is like the girly bubblegum pop.
Really?
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
I don't know. I've never
What
used.
I've heard, but I don't know. I don't lift heavy, so.
Right. I've never used headphones for anything, so.
Yeah, a lot of runners don't, right? They think like the way to go is no.
Well, there's a lot of runners that absolutely do. Trail runners mostly don't, because if you're on the trail and somebody fucking falls or somebody's trying to pass you and you're on this narrow trail, you got to be able to hear that shit. When people wear fucking earbuds on the trail, it drives me. Any real trail runner, it would drive you fucking insane. But to me, dude, I've watched people running in the gym, like, they use that to get out of what they're doing. They want to take their mind off the miles that they're running or anything like that. And if that's what you want to do, cool. But if you're like taking this serious and you want to do serious races and shit, those earbuds are gonna die at some point, and then what? Then you're gonna fall apart.
None of it works for me. I get up there and start working out at that cardiac rehab, and it doesn't matter. Podcast, music. I'm like looking at the timer.
Really?
The whole time.
Bro,
yeah.
come work out with me one time.
I will.
One time, bro. I'm a trainer, so people automatically think, well, if I ask them to go run, they're like, oh, I'm not gonna run the miles. Like, I'm asking you to run because I want to be social with you. Let's go do this together.
Yeah.
So, bro, I'm happy to show you anything.
We'll get something on the books.
Not trying to kill you, but I'd love to get you in the gym.
We'll get something on the books. It was that's kind of been my goal. With this, the first was like save my life, obviously, like avoid transplant if at all possible. And I didn't know how serious that doctor was, if he just like says that to everybody but once I started realizing that like progress was possible, I was just like, oh, I wonder if I could ever like start running. 'Cause like, if you know me, that's like, just not your thing. It's not my thing, I've just always been like almost like myopically focused on like art production and like putting that representation of me out there. And so at this point in life, I'm trying to add like layers of depth of be a more well-rounded person, to like some young guy that does need advice.
Right.
I'm not showing up like handicapped in one department,
right, for sure. Well, dude, I'm down to get down whenever you want to, so let's go.
Yeah, let's do it.
Bro, the way we like to wrap up the episode, you've been so kind. You come on, you told some of your story, people got to know you a little bit, but if you would be so kind, take a look in your camera and dot some I am statements to let the audience know who you truly are.
Okay, I should have been thinking about this more. We'll edit this, right?
Yeah. Think about it.
If we remember. I said if we
just
remember.
Leave all this part in. I am an artist. And I am an entrepreneur.
Let's go.
Yeah.
Love it, dude.
I think that's it.
My brother, I love you, dude. Thank you so much.
I love you too. This was fun.
Dude, I'm so glad that
It went fast too.
It did very fast. It always does.
Yeah.
But we'll just have you in for another one.
And I'm kind of glad we didn't get into like the hardcore war storying shit. We didn't at all, really. And I would just be like, yeah, tomorrow is the day for whatever reason. Like, I'm getting too sick. I'm puking up blood. I can't keep anything down. Like, I have to quit,
right,
at least for a few weeks. And I would go through this like baptism period of like 3 or 4 days of like just violent flu, boozer flu, where to me, in a way, I felt like my body was like coming back online.
Mm-hmm.
It's like every cracker I ate, I was like, oh, I'm getting like all the nutrients from this, and like, so there was a part of it that I would like almost enjoy in a sadistic way,
right?
Kicking on the couch.
I never enjoyed that shit.
But then you feel good again, and you're like, let's get tuned up.
Yeah, let's do it again.
Yeah.
Take you right back to day one kicking.
Yeah.
Well, dude, thank you so much for taking the time to come on. I'll definitely have you on in the future, and I look forward to staying connected with you.
This is dope.
Thank you, brother.
Yeah, this is going to be cool. We'll get together and